Hey, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Chapter 1. Classified Documents and the Oath. New York on a late March evening, the biting cold air mingled with the blaring horns of cars and the flickering neon lights from towering skyscrapers. This city never slept, and for Ava Sinclair, that was an advantage. She sat in the tiny office of the Pulse on the 14th floor of an old building in Midtown, her eyes glued to her laptop screen, fingers typing furiously. The blue glow from the screen illuminated her face, highlighting her sharp brown eyes and the defiant half-smile that played on her lips. On her desk, a cold cup of coffee sat beside a chaotic pile of papers, the remnants of 3 sleepless days. Ava Sinclair, 28, wasn't the kind of woman you'd want to face in an argument. She was brash, frighteningly intelligent, and had a sense of humor her colleagues described as both biting and charming. But she was also clumsy, evidenced by the coffee stain on her white shirt, which she'd tried to hide under an old leather jacket. 2 years ago, she'd been a star at the New York Herald, until a false story about a politician cost her job, her reputation, and nearly her faith in herself. Now with the Pulse, a small but ambitious paper, she was determined to redeem herself, not by staying silent, but by digging for the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried. And tonight she'd found something big, something massive. On her laptop screen was a PDF file sent from an anonymous source via email 3 hours earlier. The subject line, Graves Corporation, Queens Redevelopment Project. The contents were explosive. Internal documents revealing that Christian Graves, CEO of the city's most powerful conglomerate, had approved the demolition of a poor residential area in Queens to build a billion-dollar luxury commercial complex. No compensation, no prior notice, just Christian's scrawled signature at the bottom, cold and unwavering. Ava raised an eyebrow, muttering, "Seriously? This billionaire doesn't mess around." She pulled her chair closer to the desk, opening a new browser tab to check the news. In the 24 hours since the rumor leaked, Graves Corporation's stock had plummeted 10%. Twitter was ablaze with the hashtag number Christian Graves is trash, while major outlets like The Times and The Post raced to publish sensational headlines. Cold-blooded billionaire destroys the American dream. Graves Corporation, boundless greed. But no one had solid evidence. No one, except Ava. She clicked again, reopening the anonymous email. No name, no signature, just a single terse line. Expose it. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. Ava smirked, whispering to herself, "Oh, I'll expose it. But not because you want me to, because I need the truth." Christian Graves, 34, was a name even those indifferent to business couldn't ignore. He was the epitome of cold power, a man who could buy an entire city without blinking. Yet no one knew what he truly thought. The media dubbed him the cold-blooded billionaire, a man with no friends, no love, only money and ambition. But Ava didn't buy into fairy tales, good or evil. She'd been burned by a perfect facade before, and the cost had been steep. This time she'd verify it herself. Ava stood, stretching her stiff muscles, then walked to the window. Outside, the lights of the Graves Corporation tower, a sleek black glass monolith a few blocks away, twinkled as if taunting her. She crossed her arms, murmuring, "Christian Graves, if you're really the villain, I'll be the one to unmask you. But if not, someone's trembling right now." She returned to her desk, opened a new Word document, and started typing. The article's title appeared on the screen, Graves Corporation, The Truth Behind Queens. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, each word sharp as a blade. Christian Graves, New York's richest man, has just been accused of ordering the destruction of hundreds of poor families' lives. But is this document real? Or are we witnessing a perfectly staged play? She paused, took a sip of cold coffee, then added, "Either way, the Pulse won't stop until the truth is laid bare, even if it means facing the cold billionaire himself." The article was finished in an hour. Ava sent it to her editor with a message. "Print it tomorrow morning. This is our shot." She knew the stakes. If the document was fake, she'd lose everything again. But if it was real, she'd be a hero. Either way, there was no turning back. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague and best friend Jake. "You're insane, Ava. Graves will sue you into oblivion." She replied with a shrugging emoji. "Let him try. I've never known fear." She shut down her computer, grabbed her jacket, and stepped outside. The cold wind whipped through her messy brown hair, but she didn't care. Her mind raced with questions. Who sent the document? Why target Christian Graves? And most importantly, was he truly cold-blooded or just a puppet in someone else's game? As Ava rode the elevator to the ground floor, she heard a TV blaring from the lobby. An urgent news report. Graves Corporation stock continues to plummet after allegations from an anonymous source. Christian Graves has yet to respond. Ava stopped, staring at the screen. Christian's image appeared. Sharp features, piercing blue eyes like ice, and a faint smile she couldn't decipher. He didn't look panicked. He looked like he was waiting for something. "Interesting," Ava muttered, then stepped into the night. She didn't know that, across the city, Christian Graves was also watching the same broadcast from his office, a glass of whiskey in hand. His assistant burst in, frantic. "Sir, we need to respond now. The press is going wild." Christian took a sip, his gaze fixed on the screen. "No need," he said, his voice low and eerily calm. "Let them talk. She'll come to me soon enough." "She?" his assistant asked, puzzled. Christian didn't answer, just smirked faintly. On his desk, a copy of the classified document Ava had just exposed sat neatly beside another USB drive, one he'd prepared long ago. The game had begun. Chapter 2. The Cold Billionaire. The next morning, faint sunlight filtered through the gray clouds over New York, casting a weak glow on the sleek black glass tower of Graves Corporation. The 60-story building, with its sharp lines and no extraneous details, stood like an impregnable fortress in the heart of the city. But today it was the epicenter of a media storm. At the main entrance, dozens of reporters jostled for position, cameras aimed, microphones raised, all waiting for an answer from the man behind those glass doors. Christian Graves. Inside, on the top floor, Christian stood before a large window, gazing down at the crowd. Tall and broad-shouldered, in a perfectly tailored black suit, his dark brown hair was neatly trimmed, but slightly tousled at the ends. The only hint that he didn't always control everything. His piercing blue eyes were cold as ice, though a closer look might catch a fleeting trace of exhaustion, gone so quickly it was barely noticeable. In his hand was an iPad, its screen displaying the latest article from The Pulse, Graves Corporation, The Truth Behind Queens. Author, Ava Sinclair. Christian's lips twitched into a faint smile, so subtle it could hardly be called one. "She's faster than I thought," he murmured, his voice low and steady, like an emotionless melody. The office door swung open, and his assistant, Daniel, a wiry man in his 40s with round glasses, stepped in, clutching a stack of papers. "Mr. Graves, the press conference is set. They're waiting for you in the first-floor conference room. We need an official statement. The stock dropped another 3% just this morning, and the board is losing it." Christian didn't turn around, his eyes still fixed on the crowd below. "Cancel it," he said, his tone unwavering. Daniel blinked, startled. "But sir, if we don't respond, the media will tear you apart. That Pulse article's gone viral on social media. They're calling you, He hesitated, flipping through the papers, as if searching for a gentler phrase. "What?" Christian turned his head, raising an eyebrow, his sharp gaze making Daniel flinch. "Cold-blooded billionaire," Daniel replied, his voice shrinking, "and a few worse things." Christian let out a dry, brief chuckle. "They've always called me that. What's new?" He set the iPad on the desk, walked to the black leather chair, and sat down, crossing his legs with casual ease. "Let them talk. I don't care what the world thinks." Daniel frowned, clearly unhappy with the response. "But that document, Mr. Graves, it has your signature. If we don't deny it, people will believe it's true. Queens." He trailed off, as if afraid to cross an invisible line. Christian fell silent for a moment, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the ebony desk. Daniel didn't know. and Christian had no intention of explaining that the document was fake. His signature had been forged, and he'd known it the moment it leaked 2 days ago. But instead of quashing the rumor, Christian let it spread. He wanted to see what the mastermind behind it would do next. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to oust him from the CEO's chair, and it wouldn't be the last. But this time, he'd make them pay. "Get the car ready," Christian said abruptly, standing and adjusting his tie. "I'm going out." Daniel's eyes widened. "Out? Now? But the reporters—" "I know," Christian cut him off, heading for the door. "I want them to see me." 30 minutes later, Christian appeared at a hastily arranged press conference in the main lobby of Graves Corporation. No fanfare, no theatrics, just him standing before a simple wooden podium, no microphone, no notes, facing dozens of curious and eager eyes. The reporters erupted, cameras flashing non-stop, shouts ringing out from all directions. "Mr. Graves, is the document real? Did you order the demolition of Queens? What do you have to say to the families losing their homes?" Christian stood still, hands in his pockets, his gaze sweeping the crowd like a predator sizing up its prey. He didn't blink, didn't smile, just waited for the noise to subside. When the room finally quieted, he spoke, his voice deep, commanding, and so cold it made a few reporters shiver involuntarily. "I don't care what the world thinks. If you want answers, find them yourselves." No explanation, no defense. He turned and walked through the automatic glass doors, leaving the reporters stunned and furious. Shouts erupted behind him, but Christian didn't look back. He'd said enough, or rather, he'd said nothing at all. In the car, Daniel sat in the front, glancing at Christian through the rearview mirror. "Are you sure about this? That statement will only make things worse." Christian closed his eyes, leaning back against the soft leather seat. "I don't need them to like me, Daniel. I need them to fear me." Daniel sighed but said no more. In Christian's mind, though, everything was clearer than ever. He wasn't foolish enough to believe this fake document had appeared out of nowhere. Someone inside, or worse, a rival outside, was playing a high-stakes game. And Ava Sinclair, the brash Pulse reporter, had just unwittingly become his first pawn. Christian hadn't always been this man. Cold, distant, unfeeling. 10 years ago, he'd been a talented engineer living in a small Brooklyn apartment, dreaming of building projects that would change the world. But his father's sudden death, a car accident the police deemed no foul play, had changed everything. Christian inherited Graves Corporation, along with a host of enemies his father had left behind. He learned to lock his heart away, showing no weakness to anyone. Deep down, though, he was tired. Tired of being misunderstood, of bearing slander he never bothered to refute. Back in his office, Christian sat at his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small black USB drive. Inside was the real data on the Queens project, not demolition, but relocation and full compensation for the residents. He'd signed that deal 3 months ago, but kept it under wraps until the project was complete. His enemies had exploited that secrecy to spread lies. Christian twirled the USB between his fingers, his eyes darkening. "She'll find out," he muttered, "and when she does, I'll know who's behind this." He stood, walked to the liquor cabinet in the corner, and poured a glass of whiskey. Through the window, he saw the distant flicker of lights from the Pulse's building. Ava Sinclair didn't know she just stepped into a dangerous game, and Christian didn't expect that she'd be the one to rewrite the rules. Chapter 3. The Fateful Gala. The Grand Lux Hotel, nestled in the heart of Manhattan, was a symbol of opulence and power. On Saturday evening, the massive crystal chandeliers hanging from the grand lobby ceiling cast shimmering reflections onto the polished marble floor, creating an atmosphere of suffocating splendor. The elite, business tycoons, politicians, and celebrities gathered here for the annual charity gala hosted by a major investment fund. But everyone knew this wasn't just about raising money for orphans. It was an arena of secret handshakes, fake smiles, and conspiracies whispered over glasses of champagne. Ava Sinclair didn't belong here. She stood in a shadowy corner of the lobby, dressed in a server's uniform, white shirt, black apron, and a silver tray in hand. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail, a few stray strands falling across her forehead, and the cheap flats she'd borrowed from a colleague were already pinching her feet. She'd spent all day figuring out how to infiltrate this event after hearing Christian Graves would attend. Her article in the Pulse had shaken Graves Corporation, but Christian's response, or rather, his silence, left her suspicious. If he was innocent, why not refute it? If guilty, why not squash the rumors? Ava needed answers, and she'd get them straight from his mouth. "Do I look like a server?" she muttered to herself, glancing at her reflection in a nearby glass panel. "Probably not. But who cares?" She shrugged, adjusted the tray of drinks, and stepped out of the corner, blending into the stream of servers weaving through the crowd. The lobby was packed, filled with the sound of hearty laughter and clinking glasses. Ava maneuvered through shimmering ball gowns and expensive suits, trying to keep the tray steady to avoid a spill. But her clumsiness couldn't stay hidden forever. As a middle-aged man reached for a glass, she lost her balance. The tray tilted, and 3 champagne flutes crashed to the floor with a sharp shatter. Heads turned, a few murmurs rippled through the nearby crowd, and Ava felt her face flush. "Fantastic," she grumbled, kneeling to pick up the shards. "No one will notice this, right?" But as she looked up, her eyes locked onto a man standing a few meters away, tall, in a black suit, with icy blue eyes staring right at her. Christian Graves. He had just entered the lobby, his presence instantly shifting the room's energy. Conversations hushed, all eyes turned toward him. Christian didn't smile or greet anyone, just walked with a confident, almost defiant stride, as if he owned the place. 2 bodyguards in black flanked him. Though they had little to do, no one dared approach Christian without permission. Ava forgot about the broken glass at her feet. She stood, brushed her hands on her apron, and without a second thought, grabbed the last remaining glass from her tray and marched toward him. Her heart raced, not from fear but from excitement. This was her chance. "Mr. Graves," she called out, her voice cutting through the unusually quiet space. Christian stopped, turning his head, his gaze locking onto hers. The crowd parted, forming a natural path between them. Ava advanced, glass in hand, her signature half-smile bold on her face. "I've got a little question for you." Christian raised an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to being interrupted by a server, or anyone for that matter. He crossed his arms, his voice low and cold. "Who are you to ask me anything?" Ava stopped 2 steps away, unflinching. She held up the glass as if offering it to him, then asked bluntly, her tone sharp and provocative, "How does it feel to have the whole world think you don't have a heart?" A louder murmur spread through the crowd. Some covered their mouths, others let out stifled laughs. Christian didn't blink, but his eyes narrowed slightly. A tiny reaction Ava caught instantly. She'd gotten to him, not with force, but with a boldness he hadn't anticipated. He stepped closer, leaning just enough so only she could hear. "Leave now, before I give you a reason to regret this." The threat was clear, but Ava didn't waver. She tilted her head, meeting his gaze, her smile unshaken. "Oh, I love a challenge," she replied, shrugging with brazen confidence. "But hey, I'm not going anywhere without an answer." Christian straightened, his eyes darkening. For the first time that night, and perhaps in years, he felt a flicker of losing control. This girl with her messy hair and stubborn voice was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Fearless, unpretentious, brimming with curiosity and pride. "Get her out," he ordered, turning to one of his bodyguards. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to spur instant action. The guard stepped forward, grabbing Ava's arm, but she yanked free, still clutching the glass like a trophy. "Fine, I'll go," she said loudly, ensuring the crowd heard. "But Mr. Graves, if you don't answer me today, I'll be back. And next time, I won't be this polite." She winked, set the glass on a nearby table, and strode off before the guard could grab her again. Christian watched her retreating figure, his hand clenching into a fist. He wasn't angry, or at least he didn't think so, but something about her demeanor refused to let him dismiss her. For the first time, someone had faced him without trembling, and it unsettled him. As Ava reached the door, she glanced back, catching Christian's eyes still fixed on her. She smirked, a victor's smile, then disappeared through the glass doors. In her mind, it was clear. Christian Graves wasn't an easy opponent, but she'd found a crack. He wasn't as emotionless as he wanted people to believe, and she'd exploit that. Back in the lobby, Christian resumed walking as if nothing had happened. But Daniel, standing nearby, noticed something he didn't dare voice. Christian's gaze had faltered briefly as the girl left. In 3 years working for him, it was the first time Daniel had seen his boss rattled by a stranger. Outside, Ava stood under a street lamp, the cold wind cutting through her thin shirt. She hugged herself for warmth, but the smile never left her lips. 1-0 to me, she muttered, then walked off, her mind already plotting the next move. Chapter 4. The first article. Dawn had just broken over New York, but the air in the Pulse's cramped office was already as charged as a midsummer noon. Ava Sinclair sat in her creaky swivel chair, legs propped on the desk, fingers flying across her laptop keyboard so fast the click-clack echoed like an unrelenting song. Her eyes blazed, not from lack of sleep, though she'd barely managed 2 hours after the gala at the Grand Lux, but from the adrenaline pumping through her veins. Last night's confrontation with Christian Graves wasn't just a small win, it was fuel for her pen. She paused, leaned back, and reread the headline on her screen. Christian Graves, villain or pawn? A half smirk spread across her face, equal parts smug and mischievous. Perfect, she muttered, then resumed typing, each word cutting through the air like a sharpened blade. The article wasn't long, about 800 words, but everyone was meticulously chosen by Ava to sting and provoke. She wrote, Christian Graves, the billionaire, with a face prettier than his bank account but colder than an Alaskan winter, graced last night's charity gala with his trademark indifference. When asked if he has a heart, Graves responded by, having me thrown out of the room. Very charitable, don't you think? She chuckled softly as she typed that line, picturing Christian's face when he read it. But Ava didn't stop at mockery. She wanted to dig deeper. Is the leaked document accusing Graves of destroying Queens real or fake? If it's real, he's an unrepentant villain. If it's fake, he's a pawn in someone else's game. Either way, Graves' silence only fuels suspicion. An innocent man doesn't dodge questions, unless he's hiding something. She landed her final blow. The Pulse won't stop. Graves, if you're reading this, get ready. I'm closer to you than you think. Ava hit send, emailing it to her editor with a note. Post it today. This is our next bomb. She stood, stretched, and walked to the coffee maker in the corner. As she poured water into the machine, Jake, her colleague and best friend, burst in, phone in hand, eyes wide as if he'd seen a ghost. You're certifiably insane, Ava, Jake said, his voice a mix of worry and excitement. I just read the draft you sent. Alaskan winter? Are you trying to provoke Christian Graves into suing you? Ava shrugged, pouring coffee into her mug. If he sues, I'll have more material to write about. Win-win. She took a sip, wincing at the bitterness, then added, besides, I'm not just provoking him. I'm testing his reaction. Last night, I asked him point blank. And you know what? He couldn't answer. Jake sank into the chair across from her, shaking his head. I still think you're playing with fire. Graves isn't the type you mess with. That's exactly why I'm doing it, Ava shot back, her smile returning. The more he stays silent, the more I know something's off, and I'll find out what. The article went live online at 10 a.m. Within an hour, it spread like wildfire across social media. The hashtag number Christian Graves is trash from the day before morphed into number Pulse exposes Graves, and Twitter overflowed with comments. One user wrote, this reporter's got guts, calling Graves colder than Alaska to his face. Another, bet that document's fake. Graves isn't dumb enough to get caught like that. Major outlets began citing the Pulse, and Ava Sinclair's name, once forgotten after her scandal 2 years ago, was back in the spotlight. A few blocks away, in the top-floor office of Graves Corporation, Christian Graves sat behind his desk, holding a freshly printed copy of the Pulse that Daniel had just delivered. It lacked the polish of the Times or Post, but it had a raw, fearless edge that drew attention. Christian read each line, his fingers gripping the thin paper so tightly it crinkled at the edges. The billionaire with a face prettier than his bank account, but colder than an Alaskan winter. He paused there, muttering, pretty creative. His voice held no humor, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward, a rare reaction he didn't even register at first. Daniel stood near the door, watching his boss with a worried expression. "What do you think? The board's demanding an emergency meeting. They say this article's seriously damaging the company's image." Christian didn't respond immediately. He kept reading, his eyes skimming Ava's taunt. "Graves, if you're reading this, get ready. I'm closer to you than you think." He set the paper down, propped his chin on his hand, and stayed silent for a long moment. "Mr. Graves?" Daniel prompted, unable to bear the tension. "It's not a big deal," Christian finally said, his voice low but calm. "She's fishing for information. Let her try." Daniel frowned. "But the stock?" "The stock will recover," Christian interrupted, standing and walking to the window. He gazed down at the city, hands in his pockets. "She doesn't know she's helping me." Daniel blinked, confused. "Helping you? What do you mean?" Christian didn't answer. He thought back to last night, when Ava stood before him, glass in hand, her eyes fearless. She wasn't like other reporters, those who chased rumors without digging deeper. She was curious, defiant, and it made him both irritated and intrigued. He knew the Queen's document was fake, and he wanted the real enemy to reveal themselves. Ava, with her boldness, was unwittingly speeding up that plan. But there was something he wouldn't admit, even to himself. Her article unsettled him more than he expected. Not because it was false, but because it struck a nerve he kept buried. The exhaustion of being labeled cold-blooded. He was used to criticism, but Ava's sharp, humorous jab made it impossible to ignore. "Set up a meeting with the legal team," Christian said, returning to his desk. "But no lawsuit, not yet." Daniel nodded, though he still didn't grasp Christian's intent. As he left the room, Christian picked up the paper again. He stared at the final line. "I'm closer to you than you think," and muttered, "Think you can keep up, Sinclair?" "Fine." He tossed the paper aside, but his eyes lingered on it. In his mind, Ava's image from the gala flashed, her victorious smile, her challenging tone, her unstoppable arrogance. For the first time in years, Christian felt something akin to curiosity, and he wasn't sure he liked it. Chapter 6. Inside Graves Corporation. Tuesday morning in New York was still cloaked in gray skies, but the atmosphere inside the Graves Corporation headquarters was as sharp and cold as its sleek design. The black glass tower loomed over Manhattan, its thick windows reflecting the faint sunlight. Ava Sinclair stepped through the revolving doors, her worn Converse sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished black marble floor. Dressed in her old leather jacket and jeans, she stood out starkly among the sea of crisply suited employees, but her eyes betrayed no hesitation, only curiosity and pride. Christian Graves had called her last night, his deep voice curt over the Pulse's phone line. "Meet me at headquarters 9 a.m. tomorrow. I have something you'll want to see." Ava hadn't asked much, just replied, "Fine," and hung up. But she hadn't slept, her mind racing with theories. Why had he invited her? Was this a trap or an opportunity? The USB he'd given her earlier had proven part of the truth. Christian hadn't demolished Queens without compensation, but she knew he was still hiding more. As Ava entered the main lobby, a young secretary in a gray business suit approached, her tone polite but detached. "Ms. Sinclair, Mr. Graves is expecting you on the 60th floor. Please follow me." Ava nodded, smirking slightly. "Floor 60, huh? Guy really likes a view." The elevator ride to the top was silent, save for the soft background music meant to ease the tension. When the doors opened, Ava stepped out and was immediately struck by the space before her. Christian's office was vast, with a floor-to-ceiling glass wall offering a panoramic view of the city. An ebony desk sat at the center, simple yet commanding, and behind it stood Christian Graves, gazing out, hands in his pockets. "Welcome to Graves Corporation," he said without turning, his voice low and even as always. Ava strode forward, arms crossed. "I'm not here for the scenery, Graves. You said you had something I'd want to see. Where is it?" Christian turned, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. He wasn't in a suit today, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and black slacks, more relaxed but still exuding an untouchable aura. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. We'll talk like adults. Ava raised an eyebrow but sat, crossing her legs defiantly. Fine, but if you're about to lecture me, I'm out. Christian didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a subtle reaction Ava was starting to recognize. He took his seat, opened his laptop, and turned the screen toward her. A series of documents appeared: compensation contracts, a list of Queen's residents, and transfer receipts. The sums weren't small. Millions of dollars had been wired from the company to families over the past 3 months. Ava leaned in, scanning the lines quickly, her eyes widening. Wait, she said, her voice tinged with surprise. You've been compensating them since December? Then why not go public? Why let everyone think you're the bad guy? Christian leaned back, hands clasped. Because if I did, they'd exploit it. Politicians would demand more money. Rivals would smear me no matter what I did. Silence was the only way to protect those people. Ava looked up, meeting his gaze. Protect? You're talking like some kind of hero. But if you don't speak, how's anyone supposed to know the truth? Christian fell silent, his eyes darkening. He stood and walked to the glass wall, his voice lower than usual. Because no one cares about the truth, Sinclair. They just want a villain to blame, and I'm the perfect fit. His words hung in the quiet room, and for the first time, Ava detected something different in his tone. Not the usual coldness, but a weariness, almost resignation. She rose and stepped beside him, keeping just enough distance to respect his space. Why don't you tell anyone? She asked, her voice softer, no longer taunting. Christian turned his head, looking at her. His eyes weren't icy now. There was a depth to them, something hard to define. Have you ever been betrayed by the truth, Sinclair? Ava blinked, caught off guard by the question. She thought back to 2 years ago, when she'd written a false story about a politician, believing she was exposing corruption, only to discover she'd been a pawn. Yeah, she said quietly, and I paid for it. Christian nodded, as if he'd expected that. My father did too, he said, turning back to the city view. He built this company from nothing, but his rivals set him up. A car accident the police called no foul play. I know it wasn't true, but I couldn't prove it. Since then, I've learned not to trust anyone, or let anyone trust me. Ava stood still, feeling like she'd just glimpsed a shadowed corner of Christian's soul. She hadn't expected him to share this, not with her, the one always needling him. So you're protecting your father's legacy, she said, her voice low, by letting the world hate you? Christian didn't answer, just looked at her, his gaze suggesting she'd seen too much. Ava smirked, trying to reclaim her usual bravado. You know, if you'd told me this sooner, I might have gone easier on the nasty lines about you. Like colder than an Alaskan winter? Christian asked, a rare hint of teasing in his tone. Ava laughed, the tension between them easing for the first time that day. Yeah, that one. But hey, I reserve the right to keep writing if you hide anything else from me. Christian returned to his desk, closing the laptop. I didn't invite you here to tell my life story, he said, reverting to his cold demeanor. I want you to investigate. That fake document didn't appear out of nowhere. Someone inside or outside is targeting me. You want the truth? Find it. Ava nodded, tightening her grip on the USB in her pocket. Deal. But if I do, you owe me a straight answer. No dodging. Christian met her eyes, his gaze flickering briefly. Find who's behind this, and I'll answer any question you want. She winked, heading for the door. Done. But don't be surprised if I'm back sooner than you think. As Ava left the office, Christian stood still, watching her go. For the first time in years, he felt someone might see through the armor he'd built, and it left him both wary and curious. Chapter 7. The Real Enemy. Late Wednesday night, Ava Sinclair's small Brooklyn apartment was bathed in the pale blue glow of her laptop screen. The steady patter of rain outside the window mingled with the relentless tapping of her keys. The room was its usual mess. Books and papers piled on the table. A cold coffee mug sitting beside yesterday's pizza box wrappers. Ava sat cross-legged on the sofa, hair loosely tied up, her brown eyes locked on the data streaming across the screen. The USB Christian had given her had opened a door, But she knew it was just the surface. The real truth, the deep truth, was still out there, and she was determined to find it. After her visit to Graves Corporation the previous day, Ava had spent hours analyzing the data Christian provided: compensation contracts, a list of Queens residents, and transfer receipts. It all aligned with what he'd said. He hadn't demolished the neighborhood without compensation. But if Christian was innocent, why had the fake document surfaced? Someone had forged his signature, and that someone had to have access to Graves Corporation's internal systems. Ava smirked, muttering, "A rat in the nest." This just got interesting. She opened a new file from the USB, a log of internal emails sent over the past 3 months. Most were routine exchanges between departments, but one caught her eye. It was sent from m.holt@gravescorp.com to an anonymous external address, with the subject line, "Queen's Plan, Phase 1. The message was brief. "The document is ready. Ensure it reaches the press before the 25th. Sent 2 days before the fake leak broke. Ava sat up straight, her heart racing. "M. Holt," she murmured, racking her brain. Then she clicked over to the Graves Corporation website, scrolling to the leadership team. There, just below Christian Graves, was the name. Marcus Holt, Chief Operating Officer, Christian's right-hand man for the past 5 years. His photo loaded, a man in his 40s, slick blonde hair, a polished but cold smile. "Holy crap," Ava whispered, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "It's him." She immediately opened a Word document and started drafting a new article. "Graves Corporation, the traitor within." She typed fast, her words razor sharp. Christian Graves isn't the one destroying Queens, but Marcus Holt, the most trusted man in the company, might be the mastermind behind it all. A plot to overthrow, or just personal greed? The Pulse will give you the answers. She hadn't even saved the file when her laptop screen flickered black. A red line of text appeared in the center. "Uploading data." Ava blinked, frantically hitting Ctrl plus Alt plus Delete, but nothing responded. "What the hell?" she muttered, a chill running down her spine. The screen flickered again, and then all her desktop data, including the article, vanished, replaced by a message. "Files deleted." Ava shot to her feet, her heart pounding. "No, no, no!" She rushed to the table, checking her backup drive, but the laptop was completely locked. Her phone buzzed on the table, a text from an unknown number. "Stop, or you'll lose everything." She grabbed the phone, her hand trembling slightly, but not from fear. She was furious. "Bastard," she growled, tossing it onto the sofa. "He knows I'm onto him." Ava didn't need to think hard to guess who was behind it. Marcus Holt wasn't just the leaker, he was smart and powerful enough to track her. He could have hacked her system through Graves Corporation's network, or worse, hired someone to do it. Pacing the room, Ava forced herself to stay calm. Her laptop data was gone, but she still had the USB, the last piece of evidence. She shoved it into her jacket pocket, then sat down, cradling her head in her hands. "All right, Holt," she muttered. "Want to play hardball? I'll show you I'm not easy to scare." She grabbed her phone and texted Jake. "My system's hacked. Meet me at the corner cafe now." Then she threw on her jacket, pulled up her hood, and left the apartment, her eyes sharp as knives. Rain still fell, the streets gleaming with light, but Ava barely noticed. She knew she'd just kicked a hornet's nest, and Marcus Holt wasn't the type to let her off easy. At the same moment, in Graves Corporation's headquarters, Marcus Holt sat in his private office on the 58th floor, 2 levels below Christian's. The desk lamp cast light across his face, highlighting his pale blue eyes and faint, smug smile. On his computer screen was a remote monitoring interface, the last image being Ava's desktop before it was wiped clean. He took a sip from the glass of liquor on his desk, murmuring, "This girl's more persistent than I thought." Marcus had worked for Christian since he took over the company, but he'd never been content as second in command. Christian was cold, tough, and too brilliant for Marcus to outmaneuver through legitimate means. So he'd chosen another path, fabricating the document, leaking it to the press, and framing Christian, hoping the board would oust him and install Marcus as CEO. But Ava Sinclair was a variable he hadn't anticipated. He knew she was digging, but he hadn't expected her to uncover his email so quickly. Marcus smirked, dialing a number on his phone. A gruff male voice answered. "Yes, sir?" "Keep an eye on that girl," Marcus ordered. "If she gets close to Graves, deal with her. I don't want this plan falling apart." "Understood," the voice replied, and the call ended. Marcus stood, walking to the window to gaze down at the city. He knew Christian suspected a traitor, but he was confident there was no proof. As for Ava, she was just a tiny ant, easily crushed. Yet deep down a flicker of unease passed through him. If she found more, everything could unravel. Back in Brooklyn, Ava sat in a quiet corner of the nearly empty cafe, clutching a mug of hot tea to steady her nerves. Jake sat across from her, eyes wide as she recounted everything. "Marcus Holt," he whispered. "Graves' right-hand man, you're sure?" "As sure as I'm sitting here," Ava replied, her voice firm. "He hacked my laptop, deleted the article, and sent a threat. But I've still got the USB. I'm not stopping." Jake shook his head. "Ava, you're playing with fire. If Holt's willing to go this far, he won't hesitate to do worse." Ava smirked, her eyes blazing. "That's why I've got to move faster than him. I'm taking this to Christian. If Holt wants a fight, I'll make sure he loses everything." She stood, gripping the USB tightly. The game had just gotten more dangerous, but Ava wasn't afraid. She was more determined than ever. Chapter 8. Christian protects Ava. Late Thursday night, rain continued to fall steadily over Brooklyn's streets, turning narrow alleys into shimmering streams under the streetlights. Ava Sinclair hurried along the sidewalk, her soaked leather jacket clinging to her body, hood pulled low to shield her face. After meeting Jake at the cafe, she decided to swing by her apartment to grab a few things before finding Christian. She needed to tell him about Marcus Holt, and she needed him now. The USB in her pocket was her only weapon, but it also made her a target. As she turned into a dark alley, she heard the low rumble of an engine behind her. Ava glanced back, her heart racing. A sleek black SUV, headlights off, was silently trailing her a few dozen meters away. She muttered, "Damn it," and picked up her pace, splashing through puddles. The engine's growl grew louder. The vehicle wasn't keeping its distance anymore. It was closing in. Ava didn't hesitate. She bolted, veering into another narrow alley, hoping the car couldn't follow. The screech of tires on wet pavement echoed behind her, but she didn't dare look back. Her breaths came in sharp gasps, adrenaline flooding her system. Just as she emerged onto a wider street, a pair of headlights sliced through the dark, forcing her to skid to a stop, her hand raised to shield her eyes. A car door opened and a figure stepped out. "Get in, now!" The deep, familiar voice cut through the rain. Ava lowered her hand, recognizing Christian Graves standing there, his white shirt plastered with rainwater, his eyes sharp but tinged with concern. "You?" Ava panted, stunned. "How did you—" "No time," Christian interrupted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward his glossy black Bentley. The pursuing SUV screeched into view at the street's end, but upon spotting Christian, it swerved and vanished into the darkness. Ava let him drag her into the car, the door slamming shut as Christian floored the gas before she could protest. Inside, the warmth of the car contrasted sharply with the cold rain outside. Ava huddled in the passenger seat, rainwater dripping from her hair onto the floor. She turned to Christian, her voice still shaky from the adrenaline. "What are you doing here? How did you know I was being followed?" Christian kept his eyes on the road, his grip tight on the steering wheel. "I've been tracking you since you left the cafe," he replied, his tone low but steady. "I knew you were in danger." Ava raised an eyebrow, trying to reclaim her defiance. "Tracking me? Don't you have anything better to do?" Christian shot her a glance, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "You almost got run down, Sinclair. A thank you might be in order." Ava smirked, though her heart still pounded. "Fine, thanks. But you still haven't answered. How did you know?" Christian didn't reply immediately. He drove across the Brooklyn Bridge, heading toward an upscale residential area on the outskirts. Finally, he said, "I know who the enemy is, but I need you to help me prove it." Ava blinked, surprised. "You know? Who?" "Not yet," Christian said firmly. "You're not safe at your apartment anymore. I'm taking you to my place." "Your place?" Ava let out a small laugh despite the gravity of the situation. You mean some million-dollar mansion with guards everywhere? I'm not a princess who needs rescuing, Graves. Christian turned to her, his gaze darkening. You're not a princess, but you're the only one I trust to do this. So shut up and let me protect you. Ava opened her mouth to argue, but his eyes, cold yet resolute, silenced her. She crossed her arms and leaned back in the seat. Fine, but if you try to lock me up, I'll break the door down. Christian didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a subtle reaction Ava was growing accustomed to. 30 minutes later, the Bentley pulled up to a sprawling estate in Long Island, hidden behind towering pines. The house was a modern fortress, gray stone walls, expansive glass windows, and warm light spilling out from within, blending coziness with mystery. Christian led Ava inside through the front door without a word. The interior was minimalist but luxurious, black leather sofas, an ebony table, and a crackling fireplace. Ava stood in the living room, her hands still clutching the USB in her pocket. She turned to Christian, her tone serious. All right, Graves. You know who the enemy is, but you won't say. You want my help to prove it, but you're keeping me in the dark. If you don't trust me, why save me? Christian shrugged off his wet coat, hanging it by the door, then walked to a small bar in the corner. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to her. I trust you, he said, his voice low. But I don't trust that the person behind this will let you live if you know too much. Ava took the glass, sipped, and winced at the burn. I've never known fear, she said, her eyes defiant. Christian studied her, a flicker of something, not anger but a mix of admiration and exasperation crossing his face. He took a sip of his own drink and said, And I've never met anyone as reckless as you are. Endearing. Ava laughed, the tension between them easing for the first time that night. Endearing? That's the first time I've heard you compliment anyone. Don't get used to it, Christian replied, though his tone lacked its usual chill. He set his glass down, walked to the sofa, and sat, gesturing for her to join him across from it. What did you find before you were hacked? Ava sat and recounted everything. The email from Marcus Holt, the Queen's plan message, and how her laptop was wiped clean. Christian listened, his hand propped under his chin, his eyes darkening as she mentioned Marcus. So it's him, Ava concluded, locking eyes with him. Marcus Holt. You knew, didn't you? Christian was silent for a moment, then nodded. I've suspected him for a while, but I didn't have proof. He's too careful. Ava held up the USB. I've got this. His email's enough to start with. Christian looked at the USB, then at her. Keep it safe. I'll arrange a meeting with the board. But until then, you stay here. Ava raised an eyebrow. You're serious. I'm not a pet you can cage, Graves. Not caging, Christian cut in, his voice firm. Protecting. He's already tracked you once. Next time, you might not be so lucky. Ava wanted to argue, but the memory of the black SUV silenced her. She smirked, clinging to her bravado. Fine, but I need a new laptop. And pizza. I can't survive without pizza. Christian let out a rare, quiet laugh, a sound Ava hadn't expected. I'll handle it, he said, standing. Rest. Tomorrow's going to be long. As Christian left the room, Ava stayed on the sofa, gripping her whiskey glass. She wasn't afraid of Marcus, but for the first time, she felt relieved to have Christian close, and she wasn't sure she liked that feeling. Chapter 9. The Attack. Friday afternoon faded into a pale sunset over New York, painting the Long Island streets in faint orange hues. Ava Sinclair stood at the gate of Christian Graves's estate, a small backpack slung over her shoulder containing a few clothes and the new laptop he'd had delivered that morning. After spending the night at his place, she'd decided to return to her Brooklyn apartment for more things, and, more importantly, to think alone. Christian wasn't thrilled with the idea, but Ava insisted, I can't just sit still forever. I need my space. Christian had reluctantly agreed, but with a condition. I'll drive you. No arguments. Ava shrugged, figuring it wouldn't hurt to have him along. At least she'd be safe from any more black SUVs. But as they left the estate, neither anticipated the danger lying in wait. Christian's Bentley glided smoothly along the highway, The car's interior quiet except for the radio faintly reporting on Graves Corporation's plummeting stock. Ava sat in the passenger seat, fidgeting with the USB in her pocket, her mind racing with the next steps. She'd convinced Christian to call an emergency board meeting tomorrow to confront Marcus Holt, and the USB was their only evidence. Yet an unease gnawed at her. Not fear, but a gut feeling that things were moving too fast. "What are you thinking?" Christian asked suddenly, his deep voice breaking the silence. Ava glanced at him, smirking. "That you should smile more. You look like you're about to start a fight." Christian didn't smile, but a rare softness flickered in his eyes. "I'm not used to smiling when someone's trying to kill me." Ava chuckled lightly. "Welcome to my world, Graves." They just exited the highway, turning onto a smaller road toward Brooklyn, when Christian slammed on the brakes. Ava lurched forward, grabbing the dashboard. "What the—" She didn't finish before spotting a large truck blocking the road, its headlights off, no one in sight. Christian's grip tightened on the wheel, his eyes darkening. "This isn't random." Before Ava could react, a figure in black darted from the roadside, a man wielding a baseball bat. He smashed it into the windshield on Ava's side, cracking it into a spiderweb pattern. Ava yelped instinctively but quickly regained her composure, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Damn it, get out!" she shouted, but Christian was already out, leaping from the driver's side. "Stay there!" he commanded, his voice icy, but Ava ignored him. She jumped out, her heart pounding, as two more men emerged from behind the truck, also armed with bats. Christian positioned himself in front of her, fearless, but Ava knew they were outnumbered. The first man swung at Christian. He dodged, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting it hard, sending him crashing to the ground with a groan. But the second man was faster. His bat slammed into Christian's shoulder, forcing him to one knee. Ava lunged forward, yelling, "Stop!" She reached into her pocket for her phone to call the police. But the third man was already behind her, yanking her backpack off and shoving her to the ground. Ava's head hit the pavement, her vision blurring for a moment. She heard Christian roar, a sound of fury and pain, then saw him tackle the man who'd pushed her, landing a hard punch to his face. The attacker stumbled back, but the second man was up again, swinging his bat into Christian's back. The impact rang out with a sickening thud, and Christian collapsed, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Christian!" Ava screamed, scrambling to her feet despite the throbbing in her head. She rushed to him, kneeling beside him, her hands shaking as she saw him gasping, eyes squeezed shut. The three men backed off, as if their job was done, then fled to the truck and vanished into the dark. Ava cradled Christian, pressing her hand to his forehead to stem the bleeding. "Christian, wake up! Don't leave me!" Her voice cracked, fear gripping her for the first time in her life. His eyes fluttered open, dazed but trying to focus on her. He whispered, barely audible, "Don't give up." Then he passed out, his head slumping onto her shoulder. Ava held him tightly, tears spilling uncontrollably, not from the rain, but from the unbearable thought of losing him. "If you dare die," she whispered, her voice choking through sobs, "I'll write an article that'll bring you back from the grave." She fumbled for her phone, hands trembling as she dialed 911. "Help! I need an ambulance now! Flatbush Avenue near the Brooklyn Bridge!" she shouted, her voice breaking. The operator tried to calm her, but Ava barely heard. She just stared at Christian, still clutching his hand, his blood staining her shirt. The ambulance arrived after 5 agonizing minutes that felt like an eternity. Paramedics swiftly loaded Christian onto a stretcher, attaching an oxygen mask, and rushed him into the vehicle. Ava followed, sitting beside him, gripping his hand despite the medic's pleas to move. "You have to live," she muttered, tears streaming. "I'm not done with you yet." At the hospital, Christian was whisked into the ER immediately. Ava sat in the hallway, her blood-stained jacket clinging to her, wet hair plastered to her face. Gone was her usual defiance. Only a trembling Ava remained, red-rimmed eyes fixed on the ER doors. A doctor emerged after an hour, his voice grave. "He has a traumatic brain injury and 2 broken ribs. He's in a coma. We're doing everything we can." Ava nodded, unable to speak. She sank into a chair, hands covering her face as tears welled up again. For the first time she cried, not from failure or pain, but for the cold man who'd taken a beating for her. She whispered, "You can't die, Graves. You can't." Outside, the rain persisted, but inside Ava, a new fire ignited, not to fight against Christian, but to fight for him. Chapter 10. Turning the Tables. Saturday morning in the Brooklyn hospital was cold and quiet, broken only by the steady hum of machines in the ICU. Ava Sinclair sat beside Christian Graves's bed, her hand gripping his tightly, her red-rimmed eyes no longer clouded with fear, but burning with fierce determination. Christian remained in a coma, his face pale beneath the white bandages wrapped around his head. But his even breathing was the only thing keeping Ava from breaking. His last whispered words, "Don't give up," echoed in her mind like a call to arms. Ava stood, wiping her tears with her sleeve, and murmured, "You saved me. Now it's my turn." She left the room, striding quickly down the hall, her hand clutching the USB in her pocket, the last piece of evidence she had to bring down Marcus Holt. Her laptop had been hacked, her article erased, but she had no choice left but to face the enemy head-on. And she'd do it her way, smart, bold, and with a touch of humor. Back at her Brooklyn apartment, Ava rummaged through her closet for something respectable, settling on an old black blazer and ripped jeans, a mix of professional and defiant. She texted Jake, "I'm meeting Marcus Holt. If I'm not back in 2 hours, call the police." Jake called immediately, his voice panicked. "You're insane. He nearly killed you and Christian." But Ava just laughed. "That's why I have to do this. Trust me." She pulled Marcus's private office address from the USB data, then called him directly from a burner number. When his cold voice answered, "Who's this?" Ava replied, feigning a tremble. "It's Ava Sinclair. I want to surrender. I have the USB, but I don't want to die. Meet me at the cafe on 5th, 2 p.m. Marcus paused, then sneered, "Smart move, girl. Fine. But if you try anything, you won't walk out of there." He hung up and Ava smirked. He took the bait. The small cafe on 5th Avenue was nearly empty at this hour, with only a few patrons scattered near the windows. Ava arrived early, choosing a secluded corner table and placing her phone on it, recording mode already on. She wore cheap sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes from crying, fidgeting with a black coffee as if nervous. But inside, she was calmer than ever. Marcus Holt strode in at exactly 2 p.m., clad in a dark gray suit, exuding the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. He was tall, his slick blonde hair perfectly styled, but his pale blue eyes were so cold they sent a shiver down Ava's spine. He sat across from her, arms crossed, his tone flat. "Where's the USB?" Ava sipped her coffee, then smirked. "Relax, Holt. I'm not dumb enough to bring it here. It's somewhere safe. I just want to make a deal." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "A deal? You've caused enough trouble already. Hand over the USB and I'll let you live." Ava tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, you mean like how you let Christian live? He's in the hospital because of you. I bet the board would love that story more than your empty threats." Marcus clenched his fists, his voice dropping low. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Sinclair." "Really?" Ava shot back, her tone a mix of defiance and humor. "I think I do. Marcus Holt, Christian Graves' right-hand man, but you want his chair. You faked the Queen's document, leaked it to the press, then hired thugs to attack us and shut us up. Am I close?" Marcus laughed, but his eyes darkened. "You're sharper than I gave you credit for, but no one will believe you, not without proof." Ava shrugged, taking another sip of coffee. "Maybe not, unless I've got the email you sent to your lackey saying, 'Ensure it reaches the press before the 25th. Oh, and the fact you hacked my laptop. I bet Christian will be heartbroken to know his most trusted guy stabbed him in the back." Marcus leaned forward, his voice a hiss. "You think you've won? I wiped your system clean. That USB proves nothing if I say it's fake." Ava burst out laughing, a genuine sound that startled Marcus. "Oh, Holt, you're hilarious. You think I'd be dumb enough to bring the real USB to you? I just needed you to admit it, and you did." She tapped her phone lightly, winking. "Recording, idiot." Marcus paled, lunging for the phone, but Ava was faster. She leapt from her chair, stepping back a few paces, holding it up. Touch me and this recording hits the police in 5 minutes. Jake, my friend, has a copy. Marcus froze, fists clenched, his eyes blazing. You'll regret this, he growled. Maybe, Ava replied, her smile unwavering. But you'll regret it first. Bye, Holt. She turned and walked out, leaving Marcus sitting there, his face white with rage and fear. Back at the Pulse office, Ava burst into the newsroom, phone and USB in hand. Jake followed, shouting, You're alive! What happened? Ava didn't answer right away. She plugged the USB into Jake's computer, uploaded the recording, and began typing an article at breakneck speed. The headline flashed on the screen. Graves Corporation, the traitor unmasked. She wrote, Marcus Holt, Chief Operating Officer of Graves Corporation, has confessed to forging the Queen's document to overthrow CEO Christian Graves. A tense confrontation, recorded by the Pulse, offers undeniable proof. Holt didn't just betray his boss. He hired thugs to attack me and Graves, leaving him in a coma. But today, truth prevails. She attached the recording and the email from the USB, then hit publish. The article went live at 5 p.m. Within an hour, it swept across social media, the hashtag Marcus Holt exposed exploding. Police arrested Marcus at his office that evening, based on the recording Ava provided. The Graves Corporation board held an emergency meeting, stripped Marcus of his title, and appointed a temporary CEO while Christian recovered. Ava slumped in her chair, cradling a hot coffee, staring at the screen with a tired smile. Jake clapped her shoulder. You did it. Christian would be proud. Ava nodded, but her gaze drifted toward the hospital. He's got to wake up first, she whispered. I'm not done with him yet. After Ava's article went live and Marcus Holt was arrested, the storm around Graves Corporation began to settle. The board's swift action to remove Marcus and appoint a temporary CEO bought Christian time to recover, while Ava's expose cemented her role in uncovering the truth. Social media buzzed with hashtag Marcus Holt exposed, and though Ava's brash tactics earned her both praise and criticism, she didn't care. She'd done what she set out to do, vindicated Christian and brought down the real enemy. Back at the Brooklyn hospital, Ava returned to Christian's side late Saturday evening, exhaustion etched into her features, but her spirit unbroken. She sat by his bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, the bandages still stark against his pale skin. The doctor had updated her earlier. Christian's condition was stable, but he remained in a coma. He's a fighter, the doctor had said. He'll wake up when he's ready. Ava had nodded, clutching the USB now safely stored in her pocket, and whispered to herself, he better. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and spoke softly to him, despite knowing he couldn't hear. You saved me out there, Graves. I don't know if I said it yet, but thanks. And don't think this means I owe you. I paid you back by taking down Marcus. She smirked, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. But you've got to wake up. I'm not done arguing with you yet. The hospital room stayed quiet, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Ava stayed there, unwilling to leave, her hand resting near his. She didn't cry again. Her tears had dried after the attack. But a fierce resolve burned in her chest. She'd fought for him, and she'd keep fighting until he opened his eyes. Days later, Christian did wake. It was early Monday morning, just as faint sunlight slipped through the thin white curtains of his hospital room. Ava wasn't there. She'd stepped out briefly to grab coffee from the cafeteria, but the nurses called her immediately. When she rushed back, spilling half her coffee in the hallway, she found Christian awake, his blue eyes hazy but alert, staring at the ceiling. Christian! Ava dropped the cup onto a table and hurried to his side, grabbing his hand. You're awake! You scared the hell out of me, you jerk! He turned his head slowly, wincing from the effort, and focused on her. His voice was raspy, barely above a whisper. Sinclair, you're loud. Ava laughed, a mix of relief and exasperation, and squeezed his hand. Yeah, well, you're alive, so deal with it. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck, he muttered, managing a faint smirk, the first sign of his old self breaking through. The doctor arrived soon after, confirming Christian had passed the critical stage. He'll need weeks to recover fully, brain injury, broken ribs, but he's out of the woods, the doctor said before leaving them alone again. Ava pulled a chair closer, sitting beside him. You missed a lot, she said, her tone shifting to something softer. She recounted everything, tricking Marcus into confessing, publishing the recording, his arrest, and the board's response. You're clear now. Marcus is gone, and I might have made a few enemies along the way, but that's nothing new. Christian listened, his gaze fixed on her, the usual coldness in his eyes replaced by something warmer, more human. When she finished, he said quietly, You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did, Ava replied firmly. You took a bat for me. I wasn't going to let him win after that. He studied her for a moment, then said, Thank you. The words were simple, but from Christian Graves, someone who'd built walls of ice around himself, they carried weight. Ava grinned, leaning back in her chair. Don't get all mushy on me now, Graves. You owe me pizza for life after this. He let out a weak chuckle, the sound rough but genuine. Deal. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the tension that had once defined their relationship replaced by something new. Trust, respect, and maybe something more neither was ready to name. Ava stayed by his side as he drifted back to sleep, her hand resting lightly on his. She didn't know what lay ahead, rebuilding her reputation, navigating whatever this was with Christian, but for now she'd won, and that was enough. Chapter 13, 1 year later. New York shimmered in the early spring sunlight, the last of the cold winds gradually fading, giving way to a warm and fresh atmosphere. A year had passed since the chaotic days of Graves Corporation, and the city had witnessed remarkable changes, not only in Manhattan's most powerful conglomerate, but also in two individuals who once clashed like fire and ice, Christian Graves and Ava Sinclair. The headquarters of Graves Corporation was no longer the cold glass fortress it once was. Under Christian's leadership, after he fully recovered from the attack, the company underwent a complete restructuring. Marcus Holt had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy to assault, and the old board of directors, those who once tried to sue Christian, had been replaced by a new, loyal, and innovative team. Christian didn't just rebuild the company from the ashes of the scandal, he transformed it into a symbol of transparency and social responsibility. The Queens Project was completed, not as the luxurious commercial hub the fake documents had claimed, but as an affordable housing complex with schools and parks, just as he had originally intended. But Christian didn't do it alone. By his side was Ava Sinclair, the woman who once made him lose control, who sacrificed her reputation to save him, and who had now become an indispensable part of his life. After her article, The Sacrifice for Truth, stripped away her journalistic glory, Ava didn't crumble. She left the Pulse when the paper shut down under public pressure, but she never abandoned her pen. With unexpected financial backing from Christian, consider it lifetime pizza money, he'd said at the time, Ava founded a new independent news outlet called Firewire, where she continued her bold, sharp, and humorous style. Firewire quickly became a powerful voice in the media world, attracting millions of readers with its relentless investigative pieces. Together, they became New York's most formidable duo, Christian with his cool-headed, yet fair business acumen, Ava with her proud pen and fearless heart. Though they operated in different realms, their lives intersected, complemented, and challenged each other, just as they had from the very beginning. This morning, at Firewire's main office in Brooklyn, an open space with rough wooden tables, worn-out chairs, and the pervasive aroma of coffee, Ava sat at her computer, typing the final piece in a series commemorating the 1-year anniversary of her takedown of Marcus Holt. The headline flashed on the screen, "I took down a cold-blooded billionaire, but turns out he liked it." Her familiar half-smirk spread across her face as she wrote, "A year ago, I marched into battle against Christian Graves, thinking he was the villain. Turns out he was just a misunderstood man, cold, tough, but with a heart I never saw coming. I took him down with the truth, and he took me down with Well, I'll let you guess. She clicked publish and leaned back in her chair, sipping her coffee. Her phone buzzed, a text from Christian. Just read your article. You still enjoy provoking me, don't you? Ava laughed out loud, texting back, Always. Come over. I've got something to show you. 30 minutes later, Christian walked into the Firewire office, tall and imposing in a dark gray suit, his piercing blue eyes scanning the cluttered yet vibrant space. Ava's staff, a small group of young journalists, fell silent, their curious gazes following him. Christian was no longer the cold-blooded billionaire in their eyes. He was the man who survived a conspiracy thanks to their boss. Ava stood up, arms crossed, a mischievous grin on her lips. Welcome to my lair, Graves. What do you think? Christian approached, stopping a few steps away, a teasing glint in his eyes. Like a mess, just like you. Ooh, thanks for the compliment, Ava shot back, tilting her head. She pointed at the computer screen. My latest article. Thoughts? Christian leaned down, hands braced on the desk, his eyes skimming the lines. When he reached the ending, he took me down with... He smirked, turning to her. You left that open-ended. What's your game? Ava shrugged, stepping closer, her voice a mix of challenge and softness. Letting the readers use their imagination. But you already know the answer. Christian straightened, gazing deep into her eyes. Over the past year, they'd been more than allies. They'd become lovers, though neither often said the word aloud. He'd learned to open up, and she'd learned to trust. Yet their core remained unchanged. He was still icy to the world, and she was still defiant toward everything. You're playing with fire, Christian said, his voice low, his hand brushing her shoulder. Ava laughed loudly, pressing her hand to his chest, her eyes sparkling. And you love it, don't you? Christian didn't reply with words. He pulled her in, kissing her right there in the office. A bold, unhesitating kiss that drew chuckles and whistles from a few of Ava's staff. She kissed him back, arms wrapping around his neck, then pulled away with a triumphant grin. I'll take that as a yes, she said. Christian let out a rare, soft chuckle, a sound she'd grown accustomed to. You never change, he said, but his eyes were full of affection. That evening, at Christian's Long Island mansion, they sat by the fireplace, each holding a glass of wine. Ava rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. You know, a year ago I thought you were my biggest enemy. Christian took a sip of wine, his hand gently stroking her hair. And I thought you were the biggest trouble I'd ever faced. Turns out we were both right. Ava laughed, looking up at him. But we made it, didn't we? You rebuilt the company, I rebuilt my career. An unbeatable duo. Christian nodded, his gaze tender. Unbeatable because of you. Ava winked, standing up and raising her glass. To us, fire and ice, but burning brighter than ever. Christian stood, clinking his glass with hers. To us, he said, then pulled her into another kiss. This one slow, deep, a silent affirmation that no matter who turned their backs, they'd always have each other. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.